Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen Bennett, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hi, everyone.
Well, the LGA conference took place last week, and we have come to expect announcements from the government in their keynote speech, and Angela Rayner did not disappoint. So what's new in the fast-paced world of local government? Well, it's the local government outcomes framework and a call for feedback on it. Now, this relates to priority outcomes and draft metrics. You thinking offlog here? Well, maybe not. Dennis and I will cover this in a lot more detail next week, but do look it up because you can register to attend webinars in all the areas of metrics throughout July, and no doubt places are limited. So from one consultation to another, this time procurement. Dennis.
Well, yes. As the Procurement Act 2023 settles in, many commercial and procurement lawyers in our membership will have been looking forward to a bit of peace and quiet on the reform front. But not so. The Cabinet Office has now launched a 10-week public consultation on plans for yet further reforms to public procurement. The proposals aim to build on the changes introduced in the Procurement Act 2023 to ensure that public procurement plays its full role in delivering the government's industrial strategy and fostering a resilient economy that supports British businesses.
Well, I noted that the government has said that these reforms will enhance the UK's economic resilience and strengthen supply chains in line with the government's industrial strategy. And apparently they will open up more opportunities for small and medium-sized enterprises, known as SMEs, and voluntary, community and social enterprises, which are VCSEs. That does not trip off the tongue, which are, it doesn't, does it?
It
which
doesn't.
which are vital for driving the UK economy, so says the government.
Well, indeed, and through the consultation, the government seeks the views of businesses, stakeholders and parliamentarians to inform the ongoing development of its public procurement reforms. And in a ministerial statement, and more on those in the vlog, Parliamentary Secretary Georgia Gould MP said, in these times of global economic uncertainty, public procurement has a crucial role to play in boosting domestic competitiveness and strengthening British businesses. With 385 billion spent annually on goods, works and services, procurement, they say, is a powerful tool for national renewal, allowing local communities to benefit from investments in skills and access to quality jobs. These reforms, she went on, will put public procurement in the service of the people, empowering British businesses, supporting social enterprise, safeguarding our national interests, and addressing today's challenges while fostering a fairer and more prosperous future for all.
Well, the consultation is open until 5 p.m. on the 5th of September this year, and LLG will look to hold a roundtable, not sure when, we've got the summer fast approaching, but we will do, on the proposals to obtain member views.
Oh, well, that's interesting and timely, Helen. And I do wonder if members do have views or opinions on where the path of reform of procurement law and practice should go in future. And so let us know on the LLG website, Helen.
Yeah, nobody needs to wait for any kind of roundtable. Just contact us via email or in the forum. Always great to hear member views. Now, the government have issued non-statutory guidance. This is a thing that's a theme that's occurring quite a lot, actually, non-statutory guidance, and I think we'll see a lot more of it. In this case, it's been released in draft form, and it relates to the hazards in social housing prescribed requirements, England regulations, so it pertains to England only, also known as Awaab's law. And these were laid in Parliament on the 25th of June. Now, subject to parliamentary approval, it is the government's intention to bring regulations into force on the 27th of October 2025. And the policy set out in regulations will not be subject to change before that date. However, the draft non-statutory guidance may be subject to revisions to ensure the government says that the guidance, when finalised, is as helpful as possible. Feedback is therefore sought on the guidance, and practitioners are referred to the text of the draft regulations, which set out what the law will be from the 27th of October. That is, of course, subject to parliamentary approval for any further clarification on the guidance itself.
Yes, Helen, and Awaab's law will come into force for the social rented sector from the 27th of October 2025. From this point, social landlords will have to address all emergency hazards and all damp and mould hazards that present a significant risk of harm to tenants and that will require remediation within fixed timeframes. In 2026, the government will extend regulations to include the following hazards where they represent a significant risk of harm. First, excess cold and excess heat. Second, falls associated with baths and so forth on level surfaces, on stairs between levels. Third, structural collapse and explosions. Fourth, fire and electrical hazards. And finally, domestic and personal hygiene and food safety.
Well, looking ahead in 2027, the government intends to extend the regulations to all remaining HHSRS hazards, apart from overcrowding, where they present a significant risk of harm. And social landlords are advised to ensure they are preparing for the future expansion of Awaab's law, and that the guidance includes information in relation to damp and mould hazards that will be in scope for the first phase of Awaab's law and will be updated to include other hazards ahead of the coming into force of further phases.
And the government want to make sure that the policy works effectively through taking a test and learn approach and will implement any lessons learned between phases. But government warns that the phased approach does not mean that social landlords have any leeway on addressing dangerous issues in their homes in the meantime.
That's correct, Dennis. And social landlords are specifically warned, in fact, that they should continue to meet their legal duties to keep homes safe by fixing disrepair and keeping their homes fit for human habitation and free of dangerous Category 1 health or safety hazards. And further, that they should continue to meet the outcomes set out by the regulator of social housing in its safety and quality standard. What a great legacy Awaab's law is, despite the very difficult circumstances. Yeah. Now, let's turn our attention to concerning news, but no surprise, really concerning children and educational health plans. And there's been some bits in the news about that. But Dennis, what can you tell us?
Well, indeed, Helen, and no apologies for returning to this vitally important issue for many parents. The County Council Network, CCN, has described the SEND system as being in desperate need of reform after figures just released by the Department for Education shows that more than 400 young people each day approached their council for special needs support last year. Government data released on the 26th of June shows that the number of pupils this year in receipt of an Education, Health and Care Plan, or EHCP, has now reached more than 638,000 young people. Across England, the number of young people in receipt of an EHC plan has more than trebled since 2017.
Well, the data does illustrate increasing numbers of families approaching their local authority for special education needs and disability support, known as SEND. There's been 423 requests on average a day last year, totaling 154,000 requests. And in addition, 268 young people a day were given an EHCP across England in 2024, and a total of 98,000 new plans commenced at that time as well.
Indeed, and the figures are staggering, and they go on. County and unitary councils in the County Councils network currently have 282,000 young people on EHCPs within their areas. The network observed that this is almost quadruple the number of people on EHCPs in county areas in 2017. If a child receives an EHCP, the school is only required to pay the first £6,000, with the local authority financing the rest.
Yeah, but if you think about those £6,000 with schools' budgets the way they are, that's quite a demand, especially on primary schools and mainstream schools. But local authorities are facing large yearly increases in demand. And obviously, we talked before about the pressures on the budgets for local authorities coming from this particular area. And the County Councils Network warns that the system does not work for everyone, with families facing long waits for support and councils building up on unmanageable deficits. Actually, in fact, what they say is it doesn't work for anyone. And it notes that on current projections, these are set to reach 6 billion nationally next March. And councils have said the government must be open to all options when it outlines reform and must create a system which incentivizes and allows mainstream schools to better support SEND pupils, reducing the number of pupils who go to special schools.
Yes, and CCN added that the government's reforms package should include designing an inclusive system which would require significant investment and incorporates changes to school buildings, the curriculum and the workforce. Support in schools should also be more clearly defined and more accessible, reducing the reliance on EHCPs. And last week, as we discussed, the government announced it was to extend the statutory override mechanism, which keeps councils' SEND deficits off their budget books for a further 2 years, to March 2028, alongside a commitment to support councils with those debts. However, councils argue that in order to wipe the slate clean and give councils the best possible chance of delivering reform, the government should write off SEND deficits altogether. Helen.
Well, I was listening to LBC this morning. Nick Ferrari's programme had a phone in around this issue. And I'll just start by saying the government in no way has said it's definitely removing ECHPs. But that was the tenure of the conversation that was happening. And parents that were phoning up were absolutely incandescent with rage about this.
Can imagine.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll wait to see what October brings in relation to, I understand that's when proposals are going to be brought forth to see what the government proposes. But this is a very contentious and emotional area, Dennis.
Yes, indeed.
So let's jump now from education to planning. Planning, of course, at the forefront of the government's agenda to get Britain building. And in a news piece released by the government, it said that the simplified planning appeal procedures will be rolled out to the majority of planning appeals decided via written representations following a ministerial decision to change regulation. There's that ministerial decision, expected to begin by the end of 2025. The reform, we are told, is about streamlining processes to ensure planning appeal decisions can be made more quickly. The government says this will benefit developers, local authorities and communities alike.
And under the new process, the majority of written representation appeals will accept only the evidence put before the local planning authority during the planning application. This will not only speed up appeals, but will also, importantly, encourage a full body of evidence to be provided at application stage, giving local planning authorities the information that they need to make decisions, aligning with universal planning principles aimed at keeping decisions local.
Well, Paul Morrison is the CEO of the Planning Inspectorate, and his comments in relation to this are as follows. Every delayed planning decision represents potential delays to development and uncertainty for local communities. This change, he says, is a common sense approach to planning that benefits us all by removing unnecessary administrative burdens and focusing on what matters, which is well-informed, timely decisions based on high-quality applications from the start. He says the simplified appeals process will deliver a faster, more efficient planning appeals process. It will keep planning decisions local and reduce unnecessary bureaucracy, and submit once, submit right, providing the complete picture at application stage.
And initial estimates anticipate changes to regulations being made by the end of this year. From this date, applications to local planning authorities become eligible for the simplified appeals process. More detail on the changes is available via the guidance. Upcoming changes to the written representation appeals, together with a procedural guide, will follow in due course. The regulations are laid.
Just a note on planning, Dennis. LLG are responding to the technical consultation on planning committees. We responded to the first one on planning committees. This is now a technical consultation, and it very much is technical because it goes into
yes.
big detail, I mean, minuscule detail. It's due at the end of the month. If anybody has an interest in contributing, please do contact me directly. I'm holding a discreet roundtable to discuss our response, informed by those excellent members that helped frame the initial response, but more than happy to have additional voices on that. Now, something a bit different concerning what I believe started as a social media trend, Dennis.
Indeed. Helen, this is part of a trend, I think. There are some strange decisions coming from the Employment Appeals Tribunal nowadays, and we report on them from time to time. But this really is a curious piece. Calling someone a Karen is borderline racist, sexist, and ageist, a tribunal judge has said. Employment Judge George Elliott said the term typically targeted at middle-aged white women was pejorative. The remarks came in the case of Sylvia Constance, 74, who had brought claims of unfair dismissal, direct race and age discrimination, and victimisation against Harpenden Mencap, a charity that provides support to adults with learning difficulties.
Yeah, this is interesting. So Constance, who the tribunal heard is Black British, said she was targeted because of her race, having been dismissed 2 years previous because of an I can never say that word, Dennis.
Irrevocable?
Thank you very much. Breakdown in the relationship. I'm dreadful at that word. With Mencap. So bosses had previously suspended Constance over claims of emotional psychological abuse of a tenant in her care and bullying and intimidation of colleagues, the tribunal heard.
And Christine Yates, who represented Constance at the tribunal, said in a court submission that the respondent organisation has acted like the stereotypical Karen, having weaponised their privilege and more powerful position against the complainant, suspending the complainant for numerous fictitious infringements, and deflecting from their personal misconduct. And she went on, they encouraged residents under their care to do likewise. There is also something very sordid, she said, about the way in which white female management have facilitated racism by colluding with white male residents to give a misogynistic, racist view of the black complainant.
But Judge Elliott ruling said that we note Christine Yates uses the slang term Karen, which is a pejorative and borderline racist, sexist and ageist term. And the judge dismissed Constance's claims, saying that the complaints against her were legitimate and did not constitute a targeted racist campaign against her.
Well, Helen, all of this was news to me, and this case demonstrates that age-old principle, you learn something every day. And by the way, my junior school girlfriend was called Karen.
Well, I know a rather lovely Karen, Dennis, and I always felt the use of the name in this way to be dreadful for those who were christened with it. But incidentally, because I'm funny like that, I did take a cursory check of babies christened Karen in the UK this year, and you won't be surprised to learn that it came back as less than 3. I'm not sure why we couldn't have a specific number, but less than 3. Now, our final item of today, and taken from the LGA bulletin, is a revisit of their Debate Not Hate campaign, which was again seeking feedback via a survey on officer and councillor lived experience. It was published just before the LGA conference last week. So it reports that over half of councillors surveyed by the LGA have had untrue or misleading information published about their political and personal conduct, and many say they have been victims of abuse and intimidation.
And Councillor Marianne Overton, chair of the LGA's Civility in Public Life Steering Group, said, there is too much abuse. Being a councillor is such a rewarding experience, serving your community. People should not suffer abuse for serving their community. It undermines democracy severely, as people are less likely to come forward to be councillors. And I understand the LGA's survey is now being published, Helen.
Yeah, that's right. So some of the key findings in this report from the LGA include that almost 3/4 of respondents reported feeling personally at risk when fulfilling their role as counsellors. Three-quarters. And that's consistent with the findings of last year. And as was the case last year, this was higher among women, 84% feeling personally at risk. Ethnic minorities, 84%. LGBT community, plus community, 85%, and disabled respondents, 85%. This is a huge percentage of figures. 72% of respondents reported experiencing abuse or intimidation due to their role as counsellors over the last 12 months. A quarter had experienced a threat of violence or a threat of death against themselves or someone close to them. More than half had experienced the spread of misinformation about them. And a fifth of respondents, just over 20%, reported an incident of abuse or intimidation to the police, but 30% of those felt the policing response had not addressed their concern at all.
Shocking, isn't it, really?
It is.
And online abuse is deterring counsellors from standing as counsellors in the first place. Online abuse and a lack of respect from the public are the biggest deterrents to people serving as counsellors, the LGC survey has found. More than half of respondents reported high levels of concern about the impact of abuse online, including via social media. And all of this impacts upon people deciding to stand as counsellors in the first place or serving more than one term. And this was closely followed by in-person abuse and a lack of respect from members of the public.
It's really alarming.
Shocking. It's part of campaigning, part of elections now, it seems.
I know, and I'm sort of failing to understand how we've reached this point and why everyone's just so angry and feels it's acceptable to behave in this fashion. No one seems to have the answer either as to how we can address it, Dennis.
No.
And I think it's tough being an officer, but it's tough being a counsellor. And I would like to see more kindness in the world.
Indeed.
And on that note, that's it for another edition of the podcast. You can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to bulletin number 25, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too. Goodbye now.
Goodbye.